My name is Matthew Reese, and I'm here in Lincolnton, North Carolina, with the 2012 Libertarian nominee for Governor of North Carolina, Barbara Howe. Ms. Howe, thank you for joining me.
Glad to be here.
For those who don't know about you, tell me a bit about your background.
Well, first let me say, the reason I look all hot and sweaty is because I just finished a 5K run, so please forgive me. My background is I grew up in North Carolina. I'm a lifelong resident. I spent about 5 years away when my husband was in school early in my married life. But other than that, I've lived in North Carolina all my life. I was born in Wingate, North Carolina, just south of Charlotte. Grew up there. I went to Pfeiffer College and graduated with a degree in English and psychology. I married a man named Tom Howe in 1976. We have 3 children. Since my marriage, I've been a full-time stay-at-home mom. We homeschooled the whole 9 yards. The children are all adults now, young adults. I have 2 sons and a daughter. We built our own house in Granville County. I mean, literally built our own house with our own 2 hands. So that's me in a nutshell. I've been involved in libertarian politics since about 1976.
For most voters, the economy is first and foremost in this election. North Carolina's unemployment rate is higher than the national average. What policies do you propose to bring jobs to North Carolina?
Well, a common myth, you'll hear a lot of politicians say, I'm going to create jobs. Government doesn't create jobs. Government gets in the way of job creation, but it doesn't create any jobs. My proposal would be reduce taxes, reduce regulation, create more certainty for small business owners so they'll know what the rules are from one day to the next and don't have to guess, so they can actually offer products that consumers want. The notion that government creates jobs is just ludicrous. And in North Carolina, we even are worse than that because we offer massive tax incentives to lure large businesses here in hopes of job creation. And as my friend Mike Munger, who ran for governor in 2008, said, if they'll come for money, they'll leave for money. So the best way to lure jobs here is to have low taxes, low regulation, a solid infrastructure, and good education. And if we put those in place, job creators will flock here.
You mentioned cutting taxes. By how much?
Well, I can't imagine any of us think we're paying too little in taxes. I'm not going to give you a firm number right now because we'd have to examine exactly, once I get in office, we'd have to examine the budget inch by inch and determine what's duplicative, what's not necessary, what can be provided by the private sector, and start eliminating things right away. So I can't give you a number. It will be massive, though.
Your platform mentions eliminating burdensome regulations. Give me some examples.
The mounds of paperwork people have to do. You have to get a privilege license in order to do business in North Carolina. The privilege you're getting is to collect sales tax for the state of North Carolina. That kind of paperwork, that kind of burdensome regulation is just something that business owners don't need to deal with. The list is probably too long to count, and I can't, beyond that one, I can't pinpoint one right away. So my son and I ran a small business briefly in the early 2000s, and just filling out that kind of paperwork was a nightmare. So I can imagine what people who have big businesses have to do.
North Carolina currently receives 31% of its budget revenue from the federal government. Do you believe that this is a problem?
Absolutely, because one of the reasons we're in the budget crisis we're in now is that we got all this TARP money and stimulus money, and now that money is disappearing because the federal government's in a bind too. So we put in place programs that we only had temporary funding for, and so now we're kind of stuck with them and no way to pay for them. If I would do everything I could as governor to decrease our dependence on the federal government. That might not make me very popular because North Carolina taxpayers do pay a lot of tax money to the feds, but every dollar they send, they attach strings to it, and it costs us money just to get some of those dollars.
Let's talk about energy policy. There is a push to bring hydraulic fracturing, also known as fracking, to North Carolina. What is your position on this?
My position on that is about the same it is on every environmental issue. We have to protect property rights. I'm all in favor of energy exploration and people doing business here in North Carolina. If a company wants to come and explore the possibility of hydraulic fracking in North Carolina and they think it's worthwhile, they have to come here without tax incentives from North Carolina. They have to pay their own bill. They have to have bonds enough to protect the people whom they might harm if there is environmental damage. And under those circumstances, I would sign off on fracking. But under those circumstances, unless it's really worth their while, they're not going to come to North Carolina anyway. From what I understand, the resources in North Carolina are not that great, and if the cost is too much, they won't explore it.
Duke Energy is being accused of being too cozy with the Obama administration because of its financial support of the Democratic National Convention. The Charlotte-based utility has solicited donations, donated office space, and guaranteed a loan to the convention committee. As governor, would you seek to stop a public monopoly governed by regulation, such as Duke Energy, from taking such actions?
That's a good question. I haven't given that particular issue a lot of thought, and I'm not familiar enough with this issue to really give you a thoughtful answer.
Give me an overview of your education policy. Well,
what we have now in North Carolina, and probably every state in the union, is a monopoly, one-size-fits-all education program. Government provided education, and the government decides the curriculum, and parents are pretty much stuck unless they can afford to pay twice, either going to private school or homeschooling. What I would like to see is much more competition available to parents to be able to send their kids where they feel they'll get a good education. Since we're constitutionally mandated by the North Carolina Constitution to provide education, we have to work within those parameters. So what I would advocate for at this time is tuition tax credits, so that any taxpayer, whether it's the parent, the grandparent, members of your church, your boss at work, could provide taxpayer tax credit scholarships to send any kid to any school. And how this would work is that the business would set up a scholarship fund. Parents could use their tax liability toward tuition at a private school. And what would happen in the market is that there would be all kinds of small schools popping up all over the place trying to meet the needs of this market. Some kids would go to schools that focused on mechanical things. Some kids would go to schools that focused on art. Some kids would go to school that focused on math. So we would be able to meet the needs of every child in North Carolina. I have 3 children. They're all very different, and they don't learn the same way. And our expectation that we can throw 30 kids into a classroom and teach them all the same thing at the same time and expect them to learn at the same rate is ridiculous. So we need a market-based, market-driven education system that would help parents get the education their kids need.
Would it be a good idea to amend the Constitution to remove the public education requirement?
Well, you're calling for a constitutional convention there. While I think it would be, that would be a hard sell at this time, I'm pretty sure. But eventually, if we just get into a more market-based education system, I think we can solve a lot of the problems. But ideally, we would get government out of the business education altogether.
Let's move on to social issues. You opposed Amendment 1. Some libertarians come at this from the position of marriage equality as a constitutional right, while others take the position of separation of marriage and state. What is your position?
My basic position is that government really has no business in marriage other than enforcing the contract that 2 adults make. And so the notion that we grant the right to marry seems anathema to me, and I would like to see government out of the business of marriage, and the only role they would have is enforcing the contract.
You are an opponent of capital punishment. If one person has taken the life of another without due process of law, has that person not forfeited the right to his or her own life?
My opposition to capital punishment is that I don't advocate killing prisoners. I'm a big proponent of people using all the self-defense within their power. If somebody's bothering you and you're at liberty to stop them any way you can, that's fine. But once you've caught the person and rendered him helpless and harmless, I don't think you have the right to kill him. So what we do in government is we catch the criminal, we put them in jail, we try them, and they're found guilty, and then they're pretty much harmless to us. We put them away, and they can't harm other people. So I'm opposed to the state killing prisoners because there's a chance that they're wrong, and if you've created the ultimate penalty of death, you can't rectify that if you've made a mistake.